Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to all of our viewers on behalf of the Economic Justice Conclave. I am Anika and I will be your host for today's conversation with our esteemed guests, Ms.Anna Vetticad and Mr. Sridhar Rangayan. We are honored to have you amongst us today. I also extend my warm welcome to Mr. Prithvi Devani, Chairperson, Ka-Ching 2021, and Ms. Anunita Jena, President, EdgeCon 21. I would first like to ask Anunita to introduce this month's theme.
Thank you, Anika. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our third webinar. We at Sarla Anand Modi School of Economics and MIMS started the Economic Justice Conclave last year as a part of Ka-Ching, our annual fest. The aim was to bring together people from all walks of life to share their experience and help address a socio-economic issue at hand. This year, we are trying to tackle the inequalities we face across various spectra. The issue of inequality is universal. Last month, we discussed gender inequality, and this month's theme is to address inequality through visual media. In modern societies, media is everywhere and is almost unavoidable. It has major implications, but it's a two-way street. Visual media captures, reinforces, reenacts, and even serves as an origin for certain strong social behaviors. Films have a uniquely powerful presence within human culture. It has become a vehicle for culture, education, and leisure. It is therefore important to dissect this artistic visual media to understand the influence of behaviors and stereotypes in encouraging or bridging inequality via this tool. Today, we are extremely honored to have amongst us Ms. Anna and Mr. Sridhar to talk regarding the issue. Before handing over to Anika, I thank you all and hope that you enjoy the session. You can send in your questions throughout the session and we will address them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Anunita. We have with us today Mr. Sridhar Rangayan, an Indian filmmaker famous for his films on several social issues, especially the queer community. He is the mind behind some groundbreaking films like 68 Pages, Evening Shadows, and many more. And we have with us Ms. Anna Vetticad, a prominent journalist, critic, and social commentator. She is also the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Adventures of an Intrepid Film Critic. She is outspoken about her views on various social issues relevant in our society today. Welcome, sir, and welcome, ma'am. We all know that nowadays there are a lot of social media platforms, such as films, which are picking extremely relevant social issues in our society today. So, ma'am, do you think the representation of society in films is not justified, or is it artistic liberty?
I mean, how can there not be a justification for representation within films that are portraying a particular society? If we do not represent all social groups that are present in our society, then it's an indicator of who is controlling the money bags, who is telling the stories, and who is in charge of the media. Stories are being told. Why would it count as artistic liberty to have characters who are LGBT plus or Dalit or Muslim or Christian or Sikh, and to do that without stereotyping these groups? These are human beings. These are people whose stories should be told because they exist. That's it. Why is it? I mean, why should it be not happening naturally? And I must make a point here. You know, when we talk about representation, and because you're in Mumbai, chances are that we will end up confining ourselves to the Hindi film industry, which is based in Bombay. But that in itself shows that we are not willing to represent the entire country because we are speaking from Delhi and Bombay. And therefore, we are speaking of the film industry that is based in Bombay. India is the largest film producing country in the world. This is something we should be proud of. Bollywood, which is based in Bombay, is not the only film industry in this country, but the impression that India's own Delhi and Bombay-based media has created outside the world, outside India, is that Bollywood is our only industry. We should be proud of the fact. We should be proud of the diversity in our in Indian cinema. We're the only country in the world where our industries have not been destroyed by the marketing and financial might of Hollywood. We have multiple industries telling stories in multiple languages, and each of these is distinct. For instance, in a Hindi film, you will find that it's a big deal if a director makes the hero or heroine a Muslim or a Christian. In fact, the Christian community has pretty much disappeared from Hindi films for the past two decades. And in the past 6 years, we've seen a considerable Islamophobia in Hindi cinema. But when you go just a few states towards the south is the Malayalam film industry. And the one thing that has struck me in the past decade when I've been writing about Malayalam cinema is that it's no big deal. Today I will see a film where the hero is Jacob. Tomorrow I'll see a film where the heroine is Prerna. Day after I will see a film where the heroine is Aisha. And it's not a big deal. So why is this happening? One reason could perhaps be that the percentage of these communities in Kerala is not as tiny as the percentage of the Christian community is in the north. But the Muslim community in the north is a very large community. So why is it that we are still othering the community? Up to 2000, approximately 2000, we used to have films that were positively othering Muslims. So every Muslim was a Nawab and a Shire or a wonderfully saintly Rahim Chacha or Ali Mama. From the 2000s, we had regular people, which is what all minority representation should be. Normal human beings, good, bad, ugly. But from 2014 onwards, we have seen a distinct strain of Islamophobia in Hindi cinema. How can Islamophobia be right? How can lack of representation be right? Because lack of representation is dishonesty. It is a dishonest portrayal of the country and the communities that we are making films on. So lack of representation is dishonesty. And by what yardstick, in what scenario can dishonesty ever be acceptable?
Thank you so much, ma'am. I totally agree with you when you say that lately the depiction of these communities has changed. And talking along the same lines, we know that there must be some distinction in representation on these various visual media platforms, given that it is now accessible to a diverse population. So, sir, how do we then distinguish representation, like ma'am said, and glorification?
I totally agree with Anna saying that, the entire industry has been controlled by a very small segment of the population. And Hindi film industry is considered the be-all. And that has to change for sure. Regional cinema, we shouldn't even call it regional cinema anymore. It's Indian cinema per se. All the languages are Indian, and regional is like a nomination which should go away totally. So I really think that beautiful films being made in Kerala, made in Bengal, mainly. These are the two states I really see wonderful films which are basically more inclusive, more diverse, and not pandering to just the industry. So Bollywood is basically an industry which basically subsumes all other characterization, all other narratives beyond just that one heteronormative, patriarchal kind of narrative. And that has to change for sure. And I think what Anna mentioned about basically the Dalit representation, the Islamophobia is definitely rising. And for me, that's a big concern. And we're not saying that the Indian film industry is controlled by the politics of the state, but definitely it's being influenced by the politics of the state, because there's been so much of pressure whenever somebody has been able to make cinema which is outside these norms. And there's been so much of pressure. I would also like to bring into the fore basically the idea of censorship, which has been hugely right now. Not just a censorship by the censor board. There's one Indian Film Censor Board, which basically controls everything what we're supposed to see on the theater. But basically, we're also looking at the censorship by the state agencies, when you are releasing a film in a particular state and there's a particular narrative which goes against the ruling party, it's being immediately suppressed. And also this whole rise of different senas, Karni Sena, Shiv Sena, protesting against a certain depiction, that really harms a lot. I would say that like media has to be independent of state machinery or censorship machinery, and it should be able to decide for itself what can be portrayed. And the consumers, the audience, are pretty much aware of what's happening. They know what to consume and what not to consume. You don't need a external agency to really clamp down on and decide what is being portrayed. In terms of stereotyping, yes, I mean, if I'm just talking about LGBTQ issues, stereotyping has been there forever, and it continues even today. I mean, take the case of this Lakshmi bomb by Akshay Kumar, and that's really stereotyping very, very negatively a transgender community, and it plays the transgender community as a ghost, and they're not even having transgender person act in the film. It's being acted by a cis male person, and that continues. And I would say that over the last 15 years, I've seen some positive changes in basically not the mainstream cinema. I have more hopes in the independent cinema. And as I said, like cinema beyond the Bollywood, and also short films and documentaries, they've been really sensitive. And they basically have been able to bring out stories which are very nuanced. If I just talk about the LGBTQ scenario, every year we run a film festival called Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, where every year we are receiving around 60 Indian LGBTQ films. That's a huge number of films being made, but they're not being seen because the powers that be are controlled by a very few people. What is going to be released in theaters? Only star power attracts audiences. That's untrue. Nowadays, I would say middle road cinema. I mean, I'm saying when I say middle road cinema, not the big star cast films. They basically are able to garner audiences. So why are we not able to put many of these films in the theaters? So these have to change per se. And so stereotyping has changed. Right now, we see a few positive LGBTQ characters, especially I would say not so much in mainstream Bollywood cinema, but as I said, like in a cinema from the Kerala or the Bengal, we see a lot more positive portrayals. Films by Rituparna Ghosh has been path-breaking. And also some of the films from Kerala like Mutun, and they have been really amazing. But basically, I would say that like we need to change the narrative, and that can only change by, I would say, a larger number of people making this content. People from the community making this content, people from, I would say, Islamic community making films, about themselves, Dalits making films about themselves, and being able to draw a mass audience. I would say the distribution system has to change for us to break this inequality. Distributions are covered, I mean, totally monopolized by the theatrical circuit. And thankfully, the COVID is breaking that totally. The current scenario where because of the lockdown on theaters, it's being released on OTT platforms. And that really has been able to push a lot of narratives. And OTT platforms are basically beyond censorship. Censorship has not really, at least I'm talking about the Indian Censor Board has not been able to touch the OTT platforms yet. I hope they don't. But that is actually been, so we see a lot more bolder stories, more nuanced stories on the OTT platforms, whether you call it Made in Heaven or Four More Shots. I'm talking about LGBTQ issues. They've been really cutting edge. They're really kind of more, I would say, rounded up in the characters. I'm not saying every character should have a positive effect, in a sense, like it should not be preachy. It should not be that all gay men are good people, all lesbians are wonderful human beings. No, there are obviously people who are negative even in the gay community, LGBTQ community, and it should be shown so. As Anna said, like it's human, we are human beings, and all our range of human emotions that we portrayed, not just glorified or stereotyped for sure.
Thank you, sir. I absolutely agree. Like you said, there are various social agencies like the censorship board, which have an effect on how the outcome of the film, the essence of the film that comes across to the audience. Censorship being one part of it. And we know that producers play the part of financing a film. Ma'am, do you think the government institutions and the commercial banks consider filmmaking eligible for obtaining funds for the production to help these independent financing of these film projects that are taken up by these minorities or these communities? Do you think the government has any funds for such purposes?
Well, Sridhar will more effectively be able to answer that question. Certainly, the NFDC has been backing cinema for, what I think is very off-mainstream cinema for a very long time. But I think our whole goal has to be to redefine mainstream, and that redefinition can only come with a collaboration between the news media and filmmakers themselves. Firstly, I'm very glad that Sridhar said, let's not use the term regional cinema, because representation begins with our choice of words. The word regional cinema is immediately marginalizing because it suggests that these are films that work only in certain markets, whereas Hindi works in all markets, which is rubbish. Also, it implies that India has a national language and regional languages. India has no national language. But, intrinsic to that term is so much meaning. And as a result of which, the Bombay and Delhi-based media justify the complete marginalization of all Indian film industries other than Bollywood. And one of some of the most interesting developments in Indian cinema, and by the way, I love Bollywood. I have covered Bollywood for 25 years, and I am not going to be one of those people who disses Bollywood. But some of the most interesting new developments that have emerged in the past 20 years in Indian cinema have come from Marathi cinema, from Tamil cinema, from Malayalam cinema. In Malayalam, for instance, there is, of course, the very conventional masala commercial film in which Mammootty and Mohanlal are bashing 20 people at the same time and things like that. But what is very interesting is that films that are starring Fahad Fasil, Parvati, people who are not doing those conventional masala films are also making money. And I was talking last year to the director of Kumbalangi Nights, which is a film that ended up doing very well in theaters in Delhi, in Bombay, in Hyderabad, Kolkata, Madras, everywhere. And he said that the reason why Malayalam cinema has been able to bring out such quality works is because the public in Kerala has supported this quality cinema and made it mainstream. What is mainstream? It means large masses of people are going and seeing it and not just quote unquote intellectuals, right? Because of that, the filmmakers are able to experiment. And they remain rooted. They're not trying to make films that will please Punjabis and Maharashtrians and Assamese and Bengalis. They remain rooted. You tell a rooted story and you have universal appeal, right? That's the reason why. Now we need the news media to be covering all these cinemas. You talk about the representation of Dalits. There are very few cinemas in India that represent Dalits in the mainstream way that Marathi cinema does and Tamil cinema does. You should see this film Asuran, for instance, that starred Dhanush. It was a full-on masala mainstream film, but the hero and heroine were Dalits. In Hindi cinema, the assumption is, first of all, the Hindi cinema right now in the past 30 years has behaved as though Dalits don't exist, with a few exceptions like Article 15. But the assumption among the general conversation in the industry is that if the leads are Dalits, it has to be a sad story. They remade this very lovely Marathi film called Sairat, made it into a Hindi film where the main element of the film, which was caste, was more or less erased from the story. What is the point then? These are films that have the potential to make big money. It is not true that a film that is women-centric or LGBT-centric or tells a story of a Muslim will not make money. Marathi cinema is proving them wrong in this respect. Malayalam cinema is proving them wrong in this respect. Sairat was a massive hit in Marathi cinema. So, it is the laziness of filmmakers if they choose not to tell the stories of people of all communities, B, it is their own prejudice and their desire to remain dominant. And also, we need a greater diversity in the industry, not because, look, every woman or every LGBT person or every Muslim coming into the industry neither should bear the burden of telling the stories of their community. They shouldn't be forced that this is the only kind of story they should tell. And frankly, you will find that there will be women who will make very patriarchal films. There will be, for all you know, LGBT persons or Dalit persons who will make films that are prejudiced about their own communities. That's not the point. When there is diversity in the industry, automatically there will, just as there are good people in each community, there are good and bad, responsible and irresponsible people, so also there will be irresponsible and responsible filmmakers. And just naturally, in the scheme of things, in the natural scheme of things, organically, you will find films that are representative of our society.
So just jumping in per se, Anna, what you said about like people from the community not making a bad film about the community, that's so true about one particular producer director whom I know from the community who makes such terrible, very homophobic films. But let's not talk about that per se. But answering your question, initial question about funding for films per se, NFDC has played a part, but again, NFDC has really failed to distribute its films effectively. So it's not been able to reach the masses, the films. In terms of like, I don't see the banks basically have been bankrolled in some money, but basically it's been going to the big production companies. The big production companies and the banks are only supporting them. No other, I don't know of any banks or any other corporate institutions which are supporting independent cinema yet. So for me, especially, and for a lot of my colleagues, basically, who make independent cinema, we are basically crowdsourcing our films. So I basically made 2 of my films by crowdfunding. And that actually also helps in diversifying the people who are invested in your film. I mean, I have a parent of an LGBT child who's a co-producer of my film. She invested money because she wants this film to be made. I'm talking about Evening Shadows, which is about a mother and a son. And she loved the script. And he says, this is a film I would want to show to everybody that like how a mother can be accepting of a gay child. And she put in money. And that's the way to go, where you involve a lot of people across board, you know, to own the project. And they become the voice of your film. They become, when the film is released, they become the voice of the film. They tweet, they Facebook, Instagram the stories. And that helps in pushing. But still, I mean, for us to reach the theaters, Evening Shadows, we could never get a distribution in theatrically. We finally put it on Netflix. It's doing really well on Netflix. But theatrical, again, circuit is a different ballgame altogether. It's controlled, as I said, by very few. And even if we put it in theaters, I would blame the community. I would blame the LGBT community itself for not going and buying ticket and watching the film. They'll say, link kahan milega? They actually post this on Facebook groups. Where can I find a link to download this film? Or, oh, this is showing in the theater. Please go and watch it. And that's, again, our own drawback. The community has to support, and not just the community, everybody has to support independent cinema. And I don't think people are supporting independent cinema enough. And that's one of the things. We also made an effort to release short films theatrically. So we released Best of Kashish in around 7 cities, you know, one show only, because that's all we could get from the theaters. But again, we didn't find an enthusiastic audience who would go and watch these films, you know. They say, oh, short films, who wants to watch? We'll watch it on Netflix or Amazon or something like that. So that we need to change. We need to make sure that people, if you're looking at theatrical success, we need to really make the communities, not just, as I said, LGBT community, everybody who loves discerning cinema to go and buy ticket and watch. So because the producer will put in money only when they realize that they can get back the money. I mean, for them, it's a business, obviously. You know, for business to flourish, it has to be give and take. So that's what I would say that, like, I mean, we need definitely state agencies like in European countries, basically. Every state has a certain fund. Every country, every state has a fund dedicated to developing alternative cinema. I'm using the word alternative very loosely, obviously. But basically, they have funds, and that fund can be utilized. We can apply for it. It's a very democratic process. Here, there's no funds at all. Apart from NFDC, there's none at all. And that has to be changed per se. And also, I would say, like, I mean, just to come back to something, I would say that, like, in Indian cinema, the scripts are not developed enough. They just get an idea and they go and shoot it, you know, most of the people. and they don't research enough about the communities they're talking about, whether it's LGBTQ, women. They don't research enough. The scripts are not put into the process of development. They don't organize a certain group reading session of the scripts. All this strengthen the scripts per se to make it more inclusive and diverse, and that is lacking a lot. So I would say that like script development has to really be focused. I'm also part of I'm one of the members of the Screenwriters Association, which we are really trying very hard to make scriptwriters own up the scripts and develop better scripts. And basically, we have been conducting LGBTQ sensitization workshop for the scriptwriters. So those are steps we need to do. And just one point I would just want to make about a film, Tappad. And for me, that was basically a game changer for me personally, because it talked about a woman who basically stands up and which stand up to a cause which people felt she was not justified about at all. But Tappad became a success, and that for me, if you are investing in cinema, which is beyond the heterosexual patriarchal boundaries, definitely it'll work. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you, sir. I totally agree with you saying that the consumers don't really, our audience doesn't really give much attention to the short films. And I think a lot of people have a wrong notion about just the films being serving only the entertainment aspect of it. And it is often viewed that the films that address these social issues have to be serious and they cannot be entertaining side by side. And with the recent Oscar-winning Parasite as a testimony, do you think filmmaking has the power to serve this dual purpose of entertaining as well as subtly addressing this idea of disparity and these social issues?
Is that for me or for Sridhar?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I don't think we need to go so far as to look at Parasite. Like I said, just look at the Malayalam film industry, just look at the Marathi film industry, just look at the Tamil film industry to a lesser extent, but certainly Tamil also very, Asuran, which is the film that I mentioned, was a massive hit. And who decided that a film on a Dalit hero and a Dalit heroine cannot have these low angle shots where he's bashing up people and he's looking larger than life in the way a Vijay looks when he is bashing up people in one of those regular masala films. Sairat, as I pointed out, it is a film about a Dalit boy and an upper caste girl who fall in love. Again, it was extremely successful in Marathi. So India has plenty of examples of films that are about marginalized communities that have ended up doing very well at the box office. We still continue, despite the success of Vidya Balan for almost a decade now, despite the success of Priyanka Chopra, despite the fact that Kareena has continued, despite Kangana Ranaut, despite the fact that Veere the Wedding did well, Hindi cinema, the conversation in the industry still remains that, well, women-centric films don't do well, which is, we know, we can see that they don't, but that they do well. But if you start off with this attitude that they don't, then you're waiting for a film to flop so that you can say, didn't we tell you that it won't do well? But there are so many male-centric films that don't do well, and nobody turns around and says, oh, Salman's last film was a flop because it was male-centric. You understand? So it is really, again, it's about the prejudices of the people who have decided you set someone up for failure, then you will see them fail, and then you'll turn around and say, didn't we tell you you will fail? So for instance, you give an Akshay or a Shah Rukh or a Salman 20, 25 years of longevity in the film industry, which means 25 years of building up an audience. If a woman within the first 2, 3, 4 years does not get the same audience, which of course she won't, how can she within 3 years get the same audience that a hero who has been around for 20 years and been loved for 20 years get? Then within 3 years, you'll say, oh, see, we told you women-centric films don't do well. See, she doesn't get that kind of an audience. Now, with that assumption in mind, you will not market her films in exactly the same way as the men. You will not give, you will not give her the same time slots as the men. You will not bombard the if you don't bombard theaters with shows in the way you do for the films about upper caste Hindu heterosexual males, all of this is going to affect, right? The choice of, are you going to release it during board exams? Automatically you're taking away a student audience, right? So they're so careful when they are releasing the films they consider mainstream, and then they will give everybody else the lesser slots, the lesser marketing and all of that. And then if those films don't do well, they'll say, see, didn't we tell you? Nobody wants to watch a film about LGBT persons or Dalits. But that's because you don't want the film to do well. And despite all those odds, we have had so many films doing well. So, tell me, which is the Hindi film that has been most talked about in during the entire lockdown and pandemic? It was Gunjan Saxena. It's a film by, an actor she's barely been around. And we're going through this phase where anybody who's a star kid is being maligned in the Hindi film industry anyway. And this is a story about a woman. And it's a story that's told from a very feminist perspective, not pandering to a patriarchal audience. It did so well. One of the most talked about releases of the past 6 months has not even been a Hindi release. It was See You Soon, which is a Malayalam film that's starring Darshana Rajendran, Fahad Fasil, and Roshan Matthew. And it was made during the pandemic. It's a desktop, a film which is completely showing cell phone screens and computer screens. The audience is interested. But we have to, when these films are made, the industry has to ensure that the message goes out to the public, and the industry has to give, and then the exhibition sector has to give decent time slots, and it has to give decent visibility. And one has to sensitize the audience also. We can see from streaming platforms that the Indian public is interested in seeing films on all subjects and across all languages. And if the exhibition, theaters if at least need to educate themselves by watching audience behavior with streaming platforms, and then they will know that they are wrong in assuming that the average Punjabi does not want to watch a Tamil film, or that the average Maharashtrian does not want to watch an Assamese film. They are wrong. I watched the film Yuda, which is it's a Khasi film. And I watched it. I think it got a second week in Delhi due to public demand. Amis, which is an Assamese film, it got a second week because of public demand. And I watched that film in a full hall in Delhi. Who said people? And it was such an offbeat, like wacko theme, but it still got an audience. So stop saying X is going to fail and then creating circumstances to ensure that X fails. You should be interested in the success of X, Y, A, and Z. That's how film industries have to operate. And there are other film industries in India that are doing it. Bollywood needs to pursue it further. Bollywood gets more attention than it deserves, frankly. I'm not glorifying every other industry, but there are certain things that some of our other industries do from which the rest of India can learn. And that learning will come when there is representation of these industries in the news media and in the public discourse across the country.
Perfect. So I just want to answer what you just asked in the beginning, Anika, basically about what is the question about? So
I think Parasite. She said something about Parasite.
So it's serving the dual purpose of entertainment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So basically the thing is, like, I have always considered that, like, most of my films I make it like edutainment. So advocacy and entertainment. So that's what I'm trying to marry. So most of my films are basically entertaining, but carry subliminal messages about the community or the allies around that. And I basically learned from Sai Paranjpe, who I assisted for many years. She brings in a certain sense of humor. And when I say humor, it's not like the cheap slapstick comedy, but humor in everyday life. And that really enhances the film's value. That's what I feel. So I would really marry this particular humor and drama. And I love drama. I love Bollywood drama. So I would use that totally. I would use the soap opera style drama and then songs. I love songs. So I'll use all that to carry my own messages across, So instead of a boy and a girl meeting, I would have a boy and boy meeting. Basically, I would subvert the subvert the language of the Bollywood masala films and put my own messages across. I totally believe that like films on issues need not be boring at all. It can be entertaining. I would say that like Article 15 is a perfect example of a mass entertainer about an issue, and it dealt with it totally and it became a commercial success. Of course, it had stars. I understand that like Ayushmann Khurrana was a star, but I would say that like Article 15 shows up a really good example of being an entertaining film at the same time addressing an issue. And I've always believed in that. My own film, Evening Shadows, has a song by Shubha Mudgul, has plenty of humor. Every other scene is humorous in an everyday, day-to-day life kind of thing, not really your slapstick humor. And that, I think, is really important for us to carry a message. And I love the drama style. I mean, I totally think that I love to show the tear falling down. I just love to focus on that. Even my first film, Pink Mirror, has that one tear falling down when she reads the HIV report. And that for me is important because what I'm doing is I'm using a language which is already understood by the mass audiences and subverting it to carry my own style of messaging. Of course, some of my films have been criticized by the reviewers because they felt it was not intelligent enough. That's fine with me. So I would go by what appeals to the masses. And that's what I, as a filmmaker, have my duty. But I would say that, yeah, there's a flip back on that. When you have a person from the community making a film on the community, he or she tends to be too, I would say, too advocacy oriented rather than entertainment oriented. I've fallen prey to the same thing. I've tried to push too many agendas in a film, and that's not really healthy at all. You can only kind of use a vehicle to just push maybe one or two subliminal messages, but not really carry the whole thing as an agenda vehicle. So that's a drawback, and I admit to that. But I would wish that, films like O'Neill's film, so that really reuses a typical format to subvert it and carry on messages per se.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am. I totally agree that I think the prejudices about what the consumers want to watch and making the outcome based on that will need to change if we want to push these films. And like you said, ma'am, there have been a lot of examples that have proven these prejudices wrong. I would love to ask more questions, but we're running out of time. And now we'll move to the segment where we ask questions that are asked by our audience. We have a few questions. The first one from Hasti. Ma'am, can there possibly be a change in the censorship board which would allow a more liberal approach to film or print media?
Well, we've had in the past suggestions for reforms, but right now is really the worst of times to be even hoping for it. Right now, I think all we can hope for is that they don't try to make things worse. Sridhar pointed out that the streaming platforms have so far escaped the clutches of the censor board, but it was very clear in recent months when the censor board chief himself had tweeted, I would say intentionally misinterpreting a scene from a series that is showing on one of our streaming platforms called, I'm not naming this show actually because I don't want to create trouble for it, but intentionally misinterpreting a scene. It was very clear that they actually want to have control over the streaming platforms also. So at the moment, I think we have to fight to at least retain what we have right now. But yes, I believe that our system, it's ridiculous to be censoring films once you have given them an A certification, because the very system suggests that Indian adults are not mature enough to watch X or Y material. Yes, if you think that a film has material that only adults should watch, give it an A rating or give it what in some countries is called an R restricted rating. But don't tell us that Indian adults can't watch sex or nudity. And there's also so much hypocrisy in the fact that a film that treats women like dirt will be given a U or UA rating. But a film in which a man and a woman are shown respectfully having consensual sex will be given an A rating. a film in which Akshay Kumar is shown chasing Sonakshi Sinha and stalking her through a song where at one point he grabs her and forcibly kisses her. Films like that, or Salman Khan lifts up a woman's skirt with his teeth and dances behind her. Films like that get UA ratings. Films with heroes committing acts of extreme violence get UA ratings. But if there's a film in which a woman who is a regular Indian woman living in Delhi uses the kind of abuse that regular people in Delhi use, it will be given an A rating. So this conservatism about what women should be like, what men should be like, this notion that it's okay to show children showing a man treating his wife like dirt, all of these things, they are reflected in our censorship system. So there needs to be a huge revision. We should not be having cuts in films that are A films. We should only be using these ratings as guidelines for parents to decide whether a child should or shouldn't watch a film. And we need reform in our film. I don't even like calling it a censorship system, a rating system. We need a rating system, not a censorship system. But that's, I think, right now a dream, because our present establishment is extremely conservative. And I think the battle is to just retain the present level of reasonable sanity that we have.
Okay, just to add to what Anna mentioned, basically, anything which is about homosexuality or transsexuality gets an adult rating, even if they don't touch each other, even if they're poles apart, they're just not even meeting each other. My own film, Evening Shadows, where the two boys are not even meeting each other. They happen to be gay. That's it, at two ends of the world. And they just don't have any intimate scenes or love-making scenes or anything. And it was immediately said that we should have an A certificate. I fought with the censor board officials, and finally we got a US certificate. But basically, anything with homosexuality or transsexuality immediately gets an A certificate. That is ridiculous. Homosexuals and transsexuals are human beings. They are basically living the same society like anybody else. Why should they be suddenly made an adult rated just because of their sexuality or gender? That's really ridiculous. And also, I think Shyam Benegal formed a committee, I think around 5 years ago, a tribunal where they tried to review the censor board policies, and they made recommendations which has not been put into place yet. I mean, it's been almost 7 years since I interviewed Shyam Benegal, I think 7-8 years ago, and that tribunal reviews have not been put in place. And for me, that has to change. But because the rule book of the censor board still refers to some archaic kind of a rule book, and that's not been updated with the modern sensibilities. No? And we need more youngsters in the censor board preview team. I mean, if you need a censor board at all, definitely we need younger people's participation so that they bring in different ideologies and what they call morality into the review board. And that for me is something very crucial, that like the censor board rules have to be updated, revamped, totally not even updated. And that is not happening yet. So we need to rethink about it. And first of all, we should not have any censorship. We should have ratings, as Anna said. You can rate a film, you cannot censor a film. And also some ridiculous censorship. Like in my own film, they said like there's a word called Gandu. I mean, he says, and it's like it's a personal narrative and documentary film, in which he says ki unhone mujhe Gandu bola, wo beep karo. I mean, he's saying that somebody has told him that, and he's repeating the same thing. He's not even saying, he's not giving a gali to somebody else. Okay, he's just narrating what happened to him in his life. And just said beep that, and that's really ridiculous, So they need to really look at what they're going to censor and what they're going to. And as Anna said, everything about a heterosexual cis male is passed totally without, and especially if it's a big star, it's a big budget film, anything goes, and that has to change. You cannot just be bullying independent filmmakers who are making films on marginalized subjects and just pass everything which are mainstream commercial films. Yeah.
Yes, so ma'am, even I think the censorship system should be changed to a rating system, like you said. And I hope we can achieve that in the near future. Sir, another question comes from our audience, Kirti. Something like Lakshmi Bomb, which is once again showing that trans women are men in women's clothing. How are these slipping past the cracks of LGBT sensitivity training?
Yeah, so basically the thing is like we have been trying to sensitize the Bollywood industry. The other industries do not need sensitization. Other industries are doing fine per se. The Bollywood industry basically needs sensitization, and we are trying to do that. What we need really is I would say, just the LGBTQ community rising against this is not enough. Okay, more and more people from across board should condemn this kind of portrayal, and that is not happening. We LGBT community form just 10% of the population, and we already been maligned and accused because the people feel that we are the majority demanding our rights, which is not true. We're just not even 10% of the entire population, and us just shouting and screaming is not enough. We need the allies to support our call, and especially not just Lakshmi Bomb is just one example. Take a show like Kapil Sharma's show. What is happening there? Are there men? Are there women? Who are they? They're not even transgender persons, and it's abuse of women, abuse of trans persons, and it just shows are going on all the time, and nobody's doing totally anything. Nobody's condemning that at all. So we need to rise for sure. I mean, we basically also took offense to, I think, Ram Gopal Verma's film poster, which showed, which I forgot what it was. Basically, it kind of promoted its own by by attacking the LGBT community. So we raised a voice. Lakshmi Bomb, a lot of people are trying to raise a voice, but then a trans person is supporting the film. Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi is supporting Lakshmi Bomb. So the entire trans community is silenced per se. So it's left to the LGB community to really raise their voice, and we really hate this whole thing. But again, Lakshmi Bomb is a bad example. I'm talking about when we don't have enough trans actors who are trained to be actors. I agree that for somebody to play a role, they have to be a trained person, or at least have some skill set to be an actor. You cannot just pick up a trans person and say that, okay, you can act. They can act for sure, but they would need some skills and training. And for me, that is really lacking, that we need more skills development in all departments for the LGBT community. I placed this particular fact in the FICCI Frames meeting, and I said LGBT community needs especially, more training and skills building, especially the transgender community. And that should happen for sure, so that they can play their own parts. They can come up and become actors. There are few transgender actors, but they're very few. And sometimes they could not be free, or they cannot fit the part, whatever. But you cannot have men portraying women all the time. Or if they do, they should basically consult the community and make sure that the portrayals are sensitive, not like Lakshmi Bomb.
Can I just respond to the question? Okay, firstly, just because Sridhar, you had said that 7 years back, the Shyam Benegal committee was set up. So I just checked, and I'd like to clarify that it was set up 4 years ago. And it was within these 4 years that they had also given their recommendations. But as you pointed out, we've not heard anything about it since then. Regarding the portrayal of trans persons, now I think that the ultimate in evolution would be when we have trans actors who are playing the part of trans persons on screen. But until then, if we have mainstream actors who are at least not mocking and stereotyping the community while acting the role of trans persons, that would at least be a first step. But mainstream actors, where, we are in this patriarchal society of ours, where men have been given certain definitions of what machoism is, and where a major male star actually does risk his fan base by playing the role of a trans person, I think that's, in a question of is my glass half full or half empty, I'd say in that case my glass is half full. And I think we've got some good examples. Vijay Sethupathi in the Tamil film Super Deluxe had played. I mean, Vijay Sethupathi is a major mainstream star. He had played a trans person, a trans woman who undergoes, in fact, gender reassignment surgery in the film Super Deluxe, and the film is a very successful film. Also, Jayasuriya in the Malayalam film Yan Merikutti, again, a man who undergoes surgery and gender reassignment surgery, and Merikutti is his new name as a woman is Merikutti. Then there is this Kannada film, which was slightly, it was not as mainstream, but still I think it's worth mentioning because the actor got a national award for it. Sanchari Vijay got a national award for playing a trans person in this film called Nyan. Kannada viewers, I hope will forgive me. It's Nanu. So I am not he, I am she. This is a sentence that this person keeps saying to her parents. I am not he, I am she. Okay. But the ultimate for me is the Malayalam film Abhasam, in which we have an actual trans actor playing the role of a trans character. Now, Sheetal Sham. And Sheetal Sham is an actor, a professional actor. Now, we will not have trans actors if trans persons don't see that as a viable profession where they will get roles, right? And or where they will get roles where they are not just these sidey characters on the sidelines who are being mocked. Now, I mentioned a Kannada, Malayalam and Tamil film. This does not mean that these industries are to be glorified. There is a lot that they do wrong, and there is a lot that Bollywood does right. I don't want at all to suggest to romanticize and glorify other Indian industries versus Bollywood. But I'm saying, the ultimate goal for us should be that we find trans actors to play trans characters. And to say that is not possible is, look, if you're not looking, then you won't find, right? So you have to make this a viable profession for trans persons. And you obviously, just as there are from every community, there are actors. How is it possible that there are no talented actors in the trans community? Obviously, there will be, right? So our representation, also the meaning and definition of representation and our goals with representation have to evolve by the day. We cannot just be satisfied because Vijay Sethupathi and Jayasuriya have played trans persons. What's the next step? Why is it that we do have representations of gay men? Where are the lesbians in our mainstream and off-mainstream films? So we have to, every time we feel we've got one thing right, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? As audience, as media, and as creative people, everyone has to be constantly asking that question.
Thank you so much, sir and ma'am. Your answers have been so informative and insightful. And I'm afraid I don't have more time for questions from the audience. So I would like to ask both of you about your concluding remarks regarding this session. Sir, you can go first.
Sir, because you are sir, or sir, because you are older?
I know, I hate the sir thing, You can call me Sridhar, totally. I mean, Anna, ma'am, Sridhar, sir, it's a bit too much, but I just left it open per se. So basically, I really think that we need to talk about diversity and inclusion and enable that in our cinema. Not just in cinema, but all representative media per se, whether it's in television, OTT, or even print media. I'm talking about we need a more balanced views of gender, sexuality, sexual orientation, and also, other forms of marginalized communities, like as we talked about Islamic persons or Christians or Dalits. We definitely need more balanced portrayals. And for that, the systems have to change. I would say the star system has to go, and it's slowly fading. I'm happy that more and more cinemas which are diverse are coming into the fore. And the rule book of the censor board has to change. And the state agency should not have any role in basically what kind of narratives are part of the entertainment. And definitely the state agency should just leave it to the public to decide what they want to see and what they don't want to see.
Yeah, so my concluding remarks, I think representation is obviously essential because it should come naturally to us if we are conducting ourselves, whether as news media persons or as as artists or as just regular members of society. If we are conducting ourselves with honesty and without prejudice, representation will automatically happen. Representation does not mean glorification. I think that right now, for instance, I think the Sikh community should be a little concerned about the manner in which Sikhs are portrayed in Hindi cinema, because when you show a Sikh, the Sikh is always this wonderfully patriotic or wonderfully brave person, or you're caricaturing the Sikh as a comedian, all right? Now, when you belong to a community that is being positively stereotyped in this way, it might give you a warm feeling in your heart, but you have to be very conscious of the fact that what it means is that the filmmaker does not see you as quote unquote one of us. The filmmaker sees you as the other. There was a time when this positive othering was happening with the Muslim community in Hindi cinema. And now in the past 6 years, we have seen an explosion of prejudice. And you realize that that positive othering is just another side of the coin that is showing us this negative stereotyping right now. I think that there are less, when we talk about representation, we ourselves should examine ourselves and ask why, as media persons, we are not writing more about, or why the news media is not covering the visual arts that go beyond, the arts that go beyond cinema as much as they should. Where are the book review pages in newspapers? Where are the theater reviews? When I was growing up as a child, theater reviews were very regular in newspapers. Where are they now? Why is it that cinema coverage is primarily focused on not just Hindi cinema, but even if it is, I mean, if now, okay, people have started, some of the media in Delhi and Bombay have started recognizing and acknowledging one Rajnikant in Tamil Nadu. So they think, oh, we are doing such a great favor to Tamil cinema because we cover Rajnikant. They've discovered one Bahubali, and now they describe Bahubali as a Bollywood film, and they've begun to acknowledge Malayalam cinema. Why do we must realize that if we do not give representation in our own coverage in the news media, we are actually harming ourselves. Because if we are exposed to the beauty and the diversity that are the Indian arts and Indian cinema, then we will be enriched. One of the greatest gifts I know that my parents gave me was that in my growing up years, as a Malayali child growing up in Delhi, I read books from across the world, listened to music from across the world, and I watched Hindi, Malayalam, Tamil, Bengali. I watched Ray. I watched Rishikesh Mukherjee. I watched Ramu Karyat. And that enriches my life. So representation is not a favor we're doing to anybody. Representation is just the thing to do because it is the honest and right thing to do.
Thank you so much. We have now come to the end of our session, and I would like to call upon Ms. Anunita to give the vote of thanks.
On behalf of the entire team, I would like to extend my gratitude and thanks to our esteemed guest for gracing us today. It was indeed a thoughtful and exciting session. I also thank all of those who joined us today, without whose support this wouldn't have been possible. Our next webinar is on 24th October, which explores how photography portrays inequality. So stay tuned and looking forward to seeing you all. Thank you.
Thank you.